Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Capablanca saga. The last video we left off in the match Jose Raul Capablanca versus Juan Corzo, the Cuban champion, and the 13-year-old Capablanca was able to win that match. It was quite an accomplishment, and after that feat, the entire Cuba started knowing who Jose Raul Capablanca was. And I thought that we were gonna go from there, that was 1901, straight to 1911, to Capablanca's first big international tournament in San Sebastian in Spain, where he faced off against some of the old legends and some of the new upcoming stars like Akiba Rubinstein and I don't know, Rudolf Spielmann and such. But I decided that it wouldn't be fair to go there before we check out the match against Frank Marshall, as this was basically Capablanca's ticket to the big international tournament in San Sebastian, and it's a very controversial match. There is a lot of controversy behind it, so I do hope I managed to cover it all briefly. But before we start the match, Capablanca versus Marshall, I would just like to share a very nice story. Capablanca mentions it in his book, My Chess Career. After the match with Juan Corso, he says that he once visited the chess club, and then there were these two gentlemen playing chess, elderly gentlemen, as he put it, and he was just sitting there and he was watching them play for maybe hours, I don't know. And then one of the gentlemen had to leave, and then the other gentleman said to Capablanca, does he know how to play chess? Capablanca said yes, but up until that point, he never said a word. He just sat there and watched them play. And first, the elderly gentleman to offer Capablanca a full knight as odds. So Capablanca accepted, and the game was over very quickly. Capablanca won that game, and the gentleman then said, okay, I guess I can't beat you with a knight odds. I will give you lesser odds. I will give you the odds of a pawn. Then Capablanca won that game as well, and then the elderly gentleman said to Capablanca, okay, well, we're going to play at even odds. Then Capablanca won the first game. Then the elderly gentleman said that, oh, I probably got too tired by playing so long with my friend. But then they played the second game. Capablanca won that game as well, and then the elderly gentleman said that he was most likely ill. That's why he's losing so much. And Capablanca says that by the time he won the third game, that there was no disease in the world that the elderly gentleman was not suffering from. And then Capablanca said to the elderly gentleman, would you like me to give you the odds of a knight? And then, of course, the gentleman was quite offended, but he did accept. And that game was a real struggle, but Capablanca was able to win that game. He said that, he was very angry and that the gentleman was about to leave, but before he left, he asked Capablanca what was his name. And then the Cuban answered that his name was Jose Raul Capablanca, and then he said that the elderly gentleman was relieved as he knew who the boy was, and that he couldn't believe his eyes that such a small boy could play such strong chess. So one interesting story. I do hope you enjoyed that. And also Capablanca mentions that when he started preparing for his Columbia College, that he went to the United States. He needed to learn English. He did know some English, but he needed to, of course, perfect it. One day that he was in the Manhattan Chess Club, he was already known as the strongest player in the Manhattan Chess Club, and that Emanuel Lasker visited the chess club. And Capablanca said that he was very pleased that Lasker asked Capablanca if he was interested in looking at one of the positions Lasker was interested in. And then him and Capablanca sat down. And then Capablanca says that a person came through the door, also in the Manhattan Chess Club, and that he sat down and started explaining the position to Capablanca and Lasker. And Capablanca was very interested in this. He was amazed by this, as both him and Lasker were listening to this gentleman, and Capablanca couldn't believe, who is this gentleman that's explaining things to me and also to the world champion Emanuel Lasker? He said he must be some super strong Lasker's friend. And then after he was finished explaining, Lasker said that, okay, that's not really it. Then Lasker explained what the position was really about. And then the gentleman said, okay, and he just left. And then Capablanca asked Lasker, like, who was your super strong friend? And Lasker replied, I have no idea. I thought he was your friend. And then Capablanca and Lasker were both very much amazed how both of them were treating the gentleman with much respect, as both of them thought that he was the other guy's friend. But yeah, a lot of interesting stuff. Getting back to this match, I do hope you enjoyed the little stories, even though some of you are not interested in any stories, but I am. I'm sorry about that, but it's just the way it is. But getting back to this match, the match was played in 1909, and it was played in a lot of venues. I believe 7 different venues. The match started in New York, so then a lot of venues were changed, and then the match ended also in New York. I will put a bit about the match in the description below, and also a link to the page where you can check out something more about this match. Now, for those of you who are into chess history or into chess overall, you probably have heard of Frank Marshall and his I believe we can say that it is his immortal game, his American Beauty. If you haven't seen it, I did make a video about it some more than a year ago. I will put a link to it in the description below if you want to check out that game, just to give you a sense what kind of a player Frank Marshall is. He's a very fierce attacking player, and he was known to be the strongest player in the United States. So this game, by the time this game was played, he was not a U.S. champion. U.S. champion was Harry Nelson Pillsbury, but Pillsbury died in 1906. So for 3 years now, the United States are without a champion. And basically, what the organizers tried to do with this match is to verify that Frank Marshall is indeed the person who should be the next U.S. champion, and they are basically using Jose Raul Capablanca as perhaps not as a punching bag, but as something that would prove that Frank Marshall is the strongest player in the United States. This is one of the games Capablanca himself has chosen in his book, My Chess Career, so I do hope you enjoy it. And we're gonna cover a bit more stories about this match, but first we're gonna check up on some of the games. I have not yet decided which of the games we're gonna show, but we are going to show at least 3 games from this match. The match was organized as first to 8 wins, and the draws are not counting. So if you remember in the Juan Corso versus Capablanca, it was first to 4 wins. Here it is first to 8 wins. In this game, this is game 5. Capablanca already won 1 game. 3 games were drawn, so Capablanca is already leading in this match. And we will, of course, not be showing the entire match, as the entire match lasts for 23 games. But it's really an exciting match, and it's like I said, it holds a lot of controversy, and it's a really important match for Capablanca and his further career. This is a chance for Marshall to prove that he is the rightful heir to the U.S. Chess Championship throne, but also to Capablanca to prove himself to the entire world, as Frank Marshall in those days was considered to be one of the 10 strongest players in the world. So let's see this very nice game. Marshall has the white pieces, and he opens with d4. And Capablanca also mentions in his book that even though from the time he played that match against Juan Corso in 1901, 7 years have passed, or 8, this is 1909, so yeah, I guess 8 years, he still haven't studied any chess theory. He says the only chess theory he studied on openings was an analysis by Manuel Lasker of a certain line in the Ruy Lopez. It's, I don't know if you've ever seen it, after bishop to b5, where black goes f5. It's the Janis Gambit. I once actually tried this in a classical game. I was able to draw the game against the candidate master, but I didn't enjoy it too much, and I don't think anyone actually plays it today. But yeah, this is the only piece of theory Capablanca read by Manuel Lasker, and he said that it wasn't all that great, as Lasker made some mistakes in it. But okay, d4 by Frank Marshall. We have d5 by Capablanca, c4, so we have the Queen's Gambit on the board, e6, we have knight to c3, and now comes knight to f6. So we have the Queen's Gambit declined, bishop to g5, and now comes bishop to e7. Everything is all right here. We have e3, and now comes knight to e4. Although Capablanca says that by the time he was writing his book that he wouldn't really play knight to e4 now, but as then he didn't know any theory, he just he said that he overheard someone mention some time ago that Lasker at one point played this move against Marshall, so he decided to adopt it. And okay, bishop captures on e7, queen captures on e7, and now comes bishop to d3. Here Capablanca says that he would prefer something like capturing on d5, and after captures queen b3 to pressure the d5 pawn, and also hinder white's development of the light square bishop, as the queen is also pressuring b7. But okay, Frank Marshall has a different playing style. He's a very aggressive player. We have bishop to d3, knight captures on c3, b captures on c3, and now comes knight to d7. And okay, knight to f3, we have castles by Capablanca, and now queen to c2, pressuring the h7 pawn. h6, not allowing the h7 pawn to be a target, and also taking away the g5 square from Marshall's knight. We have castles by Marshall, and now comes c5. Capablanca knows that there is a big attack coming on the king side, so he wants to transfer the game in the center and also to the queen side. Rook f to e1, and now d captures on c4. Bishop captures on c4, and now b6. Capablanca allows queen to e4 for his rook to be under attack. But as Marshall does play this, Capablanca says that he's not very happy about this. From Marshall's perspective, as okay, you are threatening the rook, bishop to d3 will threaten queen to h7, but it's way too slow to play like this, as Capablanca says. He says that the only thing this queen to e4 move does is help Capablanca bring his pieces to the squares that he was going to bring them anyway, only this way white is playing into black's hand. But okay, rook to b8, getting the rook to safety, bishop to d3, Marshall now threatens checkmate, and now comes knight back to f6, attacking Capablanca's queen. We have queen to f4, and now bishop to b7, putting the bishop to this very strong diagonal. e4, we have rook f to d8, and now comes rook a to d1. Now all of Marshall's pieces are fully mobilized. We have rook b to c8, and Capablanca says that by the time he reached this position, that his position is just better. White has no serious threat, and the black's pieces are on more ideal squares. But okay, rook to e3. Capablanca doesn't like this move that Marshall played. He says that bishop to b1 immediately would have been much better. As after rook to e3 was played, we have c captures on d4 by Capablanca. C captures on d4, and now rook to c3, which would not be possible in the line that Capablanca suggested. Here Marshall plays this move now, but here bishop to b1 is a weaker move. Capablanca says that g5 is a pretty big threat after this bishop to b1. So the best line would be queen to h4, as now this g5 will not be a problem. After g5 you can go knight captures on g5, and after h captures, queen captures on g5 with check. After king to f8, now you get queen to h6 check, and now you cannot go to the g file because of rook to g3, and of course if king here, then bishop b5 check picks up the rook. This is the problem. But after this rook to c3 move, Marshall first plays bishop to b1, and now it's a different story. Now Capablanca's move is way stronger, as there is always this threat of the in-between rook captures on e3. Capablanca played g5, the queen is under attack, and here we have queen to g3. There is no point in sacrificing the knight for the pawn now, because black can always capture on e3 first and only then react to this threat. But okay, we have knight captures on g5. This was played in the game. Rook captures on e3 first by Capablanca, and now queen captures on e3. And now comes knight to g4. Capablanca can also capture the knight immediately, but first he wants to stabilize everything. Knight to g4, attacking the queen, queen to g3, and now comes queen captures on g5. We have h4, the queen is under attack, queen to g7, and now queen to c7, attacking the bishop here. And here Capablanca played rook captures on d4. And this is something Capablanca also mentions in his book. He says that it's very dangerous for someone to analyze games of great masters, not just Capablanca's games, but games of other great masters, because here everyone praised Capablanca for this move, rook captures on d4, and that his game was perfect. But later, after the game, Capablanca mentions that it's not that great of a move, that white gets counterplay after this move, that queen to f6 would have been just a much better move. You're already threatening queen captures on f2, the queen is defending the rook, so there's not much danger here. Of course, the bishop cannot be captured because of queen captures on f2. white would most likely have to retreat, and then black is just better. But okay, queen to c, we have rook captures on d4. This was played in the game as Capablanca never spent too much time calculating lines. Queen to b8 check. This is the problem where white gets counterplay. Now you cannot block with the queen because the queen has to keep an eye on the rook on d4. So king to h7 is played here, and now not capturing the bishop but rather e5 check. Checking the king and also not allowing the queen to keep an eye on the rook. The pawn is now in the way. So the rook captures rook is a threat here. But there's not much you can do here. Bishop to e4 is played, at least blocking, not allowing the bishop to stay a target on b7. Rook captures on d4, and now bishop captures on b1. And now Capablanca still has a knight, a bishop and a knight for a rook. But white will grab a lot of pawns as counterplay. Queen captures on a7, we have knight captures on e5, and now comes rook to f4. And here we have just a beautiful move where you definitely want to pause the video and try to find the move Capablanca played. It's really a wonderful idea, and I'm sure you're gonna enjoy it. So I will give you a couple of seconds as usual, while I have a nice sip of my water. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. It's truly an amazing move to find. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, bishop to e4. It's really a wild move. You're already threatening checkmate, so that's a pretty big threat, of course. And the reason why you cannot capture the bishop is next. Knight to f3 check. And now, of course, the pawn is pinned. You cannot capture the knight. If king to h1, you cannot go to h2. That's also covered by the knight. If king h1, queen to a1 is checkmate. That's beautiful. Of course, after rook blocks. I know that many of you like to say that in the comments. And another idea after knight to f3 check, if you go to f1, then simply knight d2 check picks up the rook on e4. King goes back, knight captures here, and then black is up a piece, completely winning. So bishop to e4, a deadly move. Marshall blocks this. We have g3, and now comes knight f3 check. Interestingly, Capablanca says, oh, I could have played a much better move than this knight to f3. I should have played f5. But the engine actually agrees with Capablanca. So even though Capablanca says that he didn't play a good move, the engine agrees with Capablanca. We have king g2, and now the reason why Capablanca said that he most likely didn't agree with this because he didn't play knight captures on h4 now with check, which he should have played. It's a double check from the knight and the bishop, and then after king moves, king h3, now you can just go back. And you still cannot capture the bishop because knight g5 check picks up the rook. But okay, we still always return to this, that even though Capablanca was more than able to calculate anything, he was, often rather lazy to calculate. F5, now defending the bishop, and now queen captures on b6, grabbing yet another pawn. Now comes knight to h4, a double check, king to h2, and now you can't go anywhere on the last rank because queen to a1 check would still be a huge problem. And now knight back to f3 with check. Rook captures on f3, bishop captures on f3, and now queen to e6. And now you can see that black is up a bishop, but white is up a pawn. It's an outside passed a pawn, and although black is better, black still has to be very careful. Bishop to e4, protecting his f5 pawn. We have f3 now, trying to give up the f3 pawn for the f5 pawn, which would allow white to deliver many more checks, and also would pick up the bishop on f3. Bishop to d3 now, and now queen to d5, again attacking the bishop. Queen to b2 check, king to g1, and now bishop back to b1. We have a4, white starts pushing his passed pawn, and now queen to a1. Queen to b7 check, we have king to g6, queen to b6 check, king to h5, now trying to hide the king here, and now king to h2. White doesn't allow any discovered checks, and it's interesting that now, although Capablanca could have played a few better moves throughout the game, now that he is in the end game where he is slightly better, he will play this with engine-like precision. Bishop to a2 first. You cannot capture the pawn as the bishop is hanging. First bishop to a2. Now comes queen to b5, attacking the f5 pawn, and now king to g6, defending. We have a5, and now queen to d4. We have queen to c6 with check. Queen blocks with f6, and now comes queen to e8 with check. If you tried queen captures on f6, it's very important to point out that after king captures, a6, black is in time to stop this. Bishop d5, you will play f4, not allow pawn to capture, and now the pawn queen's on a light square, so you will never be able to do this. So after queen to f6, we have queen to e8 check, queen to f7 blocking, now comes queen to a4, attacking the bishop and preparing to push the passed pawn. Queen to e6 now. Preparing to defend the queening square, but also preparing to deliver check here. We have a6, now comes queen to e2 check, king to h3, and here comes bishop to d5. White continues pushing his passed pawn. We have a7, and now what do you do here? The problem is if you play queen captures on f3, which seems like a reasonable idea, you protect the a8 square twice, then you will suffer a lot of checks here. Queen e8 check, king g5, queen e7 check, king h5, queen e8 check, king g5, queen d8 check, king goes back, queen e8 check, and it's hard to say if black will be able perhaps to hide away from checks, most likely, but still, it's a king on an open board, you don't want to allow this. Here, after a7, Capablanca didn't capture with the queen, he played bishop captures on f3, and it was in this position on move 52 that Frank James Marshall resigned the game. And he's now already 2-0 down in this match. What did he resign? Well, whatever you do here, it doesn't really work. Let's say you bring a queen into the game, but there's nothing much better you can do. The bishop here protects c6 square, so queen cannot deliver check on c6, and also the queen guards e8, so you cannot deliver check on e8. You can bring a queen into the game, but it won't help you. Here, either queen f1 or queen g2. Let's say queen g2, king moves, queen h1 is checkmate. And there is no escaping that, whatever white does. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. A bit of a longer video, but it's a really important match, and I did like to mention a couple of stories. I hope you enjoyed that, for those of you who actually watched the videos until the end. And we are going to cover, I said, at least 3 games, but maybe more from this match, as it's a really important match for Capablanca in his career and his first big international tournament in San Sebastian, Spain. But we're gonna get back to that. It's a really, I know it's chess, but it's a really juicy story. So stay put. I would like to thank John Roberts, Tobias Lichtenegger, Sebastian Zmislovsky, Dexter Williams, and Santosh Kumar Saravanan for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with some more Capablanca content, continuing the saga, of course. Thank you all, and I will see you soon. Have an excellent week.